the 19-teens and the late 1920s. By the time we get to what is a good neighbor policy in the early 30s, the economic connection is quite strong throughout the 20s. Guatemala, for example, also for a market of the United States, by the way, I should say. These areas become a significant market. Guatemala jumped from about $5.1 million of US goods in 1913 to $13.5 million in 1929. So it's a pretty significant jump. Cuba went from 75 million to 127 million purchasing US goods. El Salvador quadrupled its purchases. Honduras more than tripled theirs. Costa Rica and the Dominican Republic doubled theirs. So the United States starts to develop a financial empire as well. So the military, the political with recognition, and then the financial connections. And there are also US businesses involved in the region. One of the most prominent is the fruit companies, especially United Fruit Company, OFCO. But there's also Standard Fruit and Cuomo Fruit Company. And eventually United Fruit buys them up and eventually changes it develops. In the 30s, there's a marketing character created, Miss Chiquita, and then eventually Chiquita evolves into Chiquita Fruit Company. But United Fruit eventually gains quite a bit of influence in the region. This is important when we get to this, talking about the financial connections. And just to give you an example, United Fruit, and some of the research that I did looking at Central American countries in the 30s in the US response to revolution between 30 and 32, I came across an interesting report. And in 1930, there was a robbery at a railroad company in Tela, Honduras. And the railroad company was a subsidiary of United Fruit. And they couldn't figure out who did it. It was $90,000 in payroll, which is a pretty significant amount. Just kind of disappears. And the local magistrate did an investigation, wasn't quite sure, had a few suspects, but wasn't really moving quickly. So United Fruit hired private investigators. A former police officer from Mexico who had is former because of his tactics in Mexico, and former security officer from the United States. And they hire these two gentlemen to investigate, and they don't get anywhere for a couple weeks. So eventually they decide to step up the tactics. They have several individuals, employees, workers from Italy and from different parts of Central America. So they start torturing them one day. They fire up the engines and machines, the tractor engines, and do some nasty things. And they also have two Americans, by the way, in custody. The two Americans are not tortured, just others. And the townspeople hear the screams and during the night and show up, and it's the Tela railroad manager knows he's going to be blamed for it, so he kills himself. Eventually, the two are convicted because of the torture. One commits suicide in jail, the other gets a year. And the two Americans are pushed forward to the next level of the court as the people who committed the crime, even though nobody believes they did. Even the magistrate doesn't think there's enough evidence. Well, the one works for United Fruit. At the next level, he's acquitted, and he's sent home. And the other guy, who happened to be a gambler coming through town, is convicted to 9 years to be served in the worst prison in Honduras, which is an extraordinary sentence given the crime in Honduran law. In fact, they said he's being sent to death. So there's this scramble to free him, but in the scramble, they find out that another employee of United Fruit paid the court to convict him 9 years and send him to this court and to release the United Fruit. So this is the stuff United Fruit's getting involved in very early. This is 1930. They're also, if you read about the overthrow of Arbenz in Guatemala, they're involved in that series of events as well. Because they control a lot of land and they have business interests here. They're making a lot of money. And Tela was their port, their way of getting bananas to the United States. And so they needed to send a message. And there's even a discussion with the Secretary of State, Henry Stimson, with the lawyers from Boston. United Fruit was out of Boston. And they're sitting in Henry Stimson's office, and he's saying, you know, this happened, and this happened, and this has got to stop. And they say, okay, we'll make changes. No problem. We'll do this. And Stimson, of course, says, okay, good. And nothing really changes. In fact, in the next year, they fire about 800 employees. Some of them who are connected gave comments to investigators about their role. So it's the financial empire is quite strong, and things are pretty tense. And the United States likes to use the Navy. And this is send the Navy around, ships like this going. This is a ship that cruised in the mid-20s, and so you could bring Marines to a tense situation very quickly. And the United States did it frequently. You got to keep that in mind. They did it frequently. And just to give you an example, this is years and places of U.S. intervention in Central America. For the extended period, that's actual occupation and running the governments in really essentially in Nicaragua and in Haiti and Cuba. These are years of U.S. military intervention. Okay, now as you can imagine, with this going on, there's growing criticism of U.S. policy in the 1920s coming out of Latin America. There are all kinds of conferences held and in which the United States is criticized for being heavy-handed, using the military, intervening where they shouldn't be intervening. And here's just a sketchy evidence, an overview of how much that was actually occurring.